I'm going to try to make your works available for our listeners and our followers. I think I'll be able to share with them some links. So viewers and listeners, look out for some links so that you can get to know about the works and the other publications of John Kegel, which I'm just going to paste right in the description panel. So we want to get started with the discussion of the book. So the format which we usually follow on the series is we usually get our author to give him an opportunity to just tell us what the main ideas of the book and its central argument is, and then we can get into the issue. So this is your time.
Okay, thank you. So I think really the core idea of the book is that when you look at Rwanda's history, and especially the history that is connected to the genocide, a lot of research has been done on the 100 days of genocide, right, which occurred in 1994. In 100 days, 800,000 Tutsi and moderate Hutu were killed by extremist Hutus. And a lot of research has been done on those 100 days. However, those 100 days took place in the context of a 4-year civil war. And the basic contention of the book is that you cannot understand the genocide unless you understand the 4-year civil war in which it took place. Because, of course, there are links between what happens on the battlefield. So in that sense, it is also a military history, but it really tries to connect the events of the war to the political events which then lead to the genocide. What runs out of that, what comes out of that is another important part of the book, especially the opening chapters, also discuss the history of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which had been sketched before, but I think I have done it now in a bit more depth. So for the listeners who are not very familiar with the story, the genocide in Rwanda was basically committed by the government forces, extremists within the government army, and then supported by ethnic militias. And they were stopped by this rebel group, which is called the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which its history lies in that its members grew up in Uganda as refugees because they had fled Rwanda during an earlier phase of violence between 1959 and 1964. So really, I trace the history of that movement from 1959, the story of the refugees, and then how eventually they decide to organize themselves in an armed group, and they enter Rwanda on the 1st of October 1990, and from there is the history of the civil war, the genocide, and then what I think is an important part as well is the campaign against genocide, which is actually what stops the genocide, right? The genocide is stopped by a military victory of the RPF over the government forces. There's no international intervention. It doesn't just stop by itself. So that's sort of the core argument of the book. And I think another corollary of that is that I sort of want to make the point that African military history is worth studying. I think it is a subject which is particularly understudied within sort of African military history, or within African history. And I think that comes from both Africanists and military historians. I think Africanists, especially the modern ones, find military history not very interesting. And the same goes for military historians who believe, right, mainstream military historians who believe there's not much to be found in African history. And I think both sides are completely wrong. I think it's very interesting and key. And the part of the book as well is that the Rwandan Patriotic Front was a very disciplined rebel movement. And so connected to the fact that I think it's worth studying African military history is that I also want to help correct the idea. One of the editors of the Journal of African Military History wrote it very neatly. Basically, if we look at history today, we have ideas of African pre-colonial empires. Right, in many fields in history, the view of Africa has been modernized, but actually the idea of an African soldier as a professional, disciplined person has not come out, right? Often it's sort of the blood diamond idea of African military history with his rebel groups, drugs, child soldiers. Of course, that's part of African military history, but there's much more there.
Oh yes, yes, that's very important. And one thing that I may want to just get our student audience to master and understand would be that a lot of people just distance themselves from reading military history or African military history, as we say it, because they think that there's not much to learn. And there's quite a group of students who also believe that there's nothing to gain out of reading a military book or a book about the history of a war or something. You don't have necessarily to be a major of history or a major of war studies for you to study these kinds of works, because the important point, to note, especially from the war that you write about, is that this is a war that affected the political order of the time. It's a war that affected the economy. It's a war that affected the environment. It's a war that affected the way the society, handles quite a lot of things. So it is quite a lot that we get to learn from studying these wars, and they get to affect multiple facets of life. Multiple institutions get to be affected. So those are some of the things that we get to learn from these books. And which should say thank you so much to you for gifting us